Hello and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Better Call Saul Season 2, Episode 3, entitled Amarillo. And Amarillo is where we start in this episode, not very subtly at all, panning past a giant Texas flag painted on the side of this building to a figure wearing a giant 10-gallon cowboy hat of the most ridiculous variety you could imagine. And of course he looks up and it's our gunslinger Jimmy McGill in Texas to help out some seniors with some legally questionable tactics. I've said this every single recap so far, but still, it's just a wonder to watch Slippin' Jimmy in action doing his spiel. And again, you have that great con man kind of thing. He has this bus full of senior citizens stop, and you see him pay off the driver, and you're like, where is this going? Why is Saul getting on this bus? What is his plan here? And then he gets on the bus and he's asking for the specific lady. He says, "Is Doris here? Where's Doris?" And we find out that she is a member of the Sandpiper retirement community, and so are all these other people on this bus. And he works his magic. He's just ever so subtly says, "Oh wow, I'm here to help you get your money back from those Sandpiper people," and says it just loud enough so everybody else hears, and they're like, "Well, what happened? What happened?" And so he's like, "Well, since you're asking, I'll tell you what happened. I'll explain to you and it's not like anybody's done anything wrong or held anybody up with a gun. I don't want you to have that in your image in your head at all. What has happened here is just a real simple misunderstanding." And he goes through and he gives his great Matlock, but as a cowboy, version of this pitch to the Sandpiper case, and gets all of these people who have been probably overcharged by the Sandpiper retirement home to fill out client forms that they're going to jump onto the case and be part of this class action lawsuit. And we find out in the next scene that this is not technically legal, or at least not moral in the sense that lawyers think of it, because what Saul is doing is something called solicitation, which is, so I didn't know that this was a thing, but apparently if you're a lawyer, you're not allowed to go up to someone personally and say, "You need a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Here's how you've been wronged. Let me represent you." You can do all kinds of other stuff. You can run ads. You can send out mailers. You can put up billboards. But one-to-one telling someone, "I'm going to represent you. Here's how you've been wronged," I guess that steps over some kind of line. But he has all these... He has all these subscriptions, people signing up to be part of the law case, which is obviously good for his law firm, Davis and Maine. We see him once again at the Hamlin and McGill, their law offices in their big conference room, and his boss is just buttering him up big time, saying, "Wow, he did all this great stuff. He got all these clients. Man, isn't this great?" And of course, Chuck's there, and Chuck knows Slippin' Jimmy. He knows what this guy is capable of, and he knows it doesn't make sense. And he kind of pipes up a little bit. He's like, "Yeah, how we only got one response from those people, and suddenly we have 25 people on board. How did that happen exactly, Jimmy?" And of course, Jimmy dances his way around it, but Chuck knows. And when Chuck raises that question, it kicks off the wheels in Kim's mind, because now Kim knows Slippin' Jimmy too. And we saw in the last episode, she said to him, "I don't want to hear about your outside the law type stuff. When you're coloring outside the lines, do not tell me about it. I don't want to know." And he didn't tell her about his trip to Texas, but she figures it out and very quickly becomes very cold to him. They were playing footy under the table in the last episode. She's like, "Nope, that's not happening now. You are," and he has to chase her down and tries to talk his way around it, but she says, "No, I know what you did. You can explain it however you want to, but I understand what's happening." And it's really an interesting turning point for Jimmy, because we've seen throughout all of the season 1 of episode Better Call Saul that he keeps, whenever he tries to do the right thing, it doesn't go well for him. But here he is being chastised for doing the things the wrong way. He's gone his way. He's done the Slip and Jimmy thing, and it's not going to work for Kim, and he understands that now. So he tries to think of the right way to do it. He's like, okay, I've got to do it the right way. What do I do? And he comes up with this TV commercial. And there's a great moment where him and his assistant in the law firm are looking at a TV commercial that the law firm has run, and it's just like giant blocks of text on a screen, and the guy's like, they worked really hard on that. And Jimmy's obviously aghast at how bad these people are at sort of visual mediums, and he says, what do you mean they worked really hard about it? And the guy points at the swirl in the background. He's like, they had a lot of meetings about whether that was too nebulous or not nebulous enough. They wanted it to be swirly, but not too swirly. And Jimmy gets this like deer in the headlights look, like, oh crap, is that what I'm dealing with? I'm dealing with people who don't understand how pictures work. And so he decides to do an end around on the law firm and make his own television commercial. And we get a great cameo back from season 1 with the guys who were filming him talking about his how he's been persecuted by Hamlin and McGill, and the guy taking down the sign that he pays to fall off and then helps him get back up in that kind of scam. And those guys are back, and they're so classic, because there's the one guy who's like the shorter dude with the dark hair. He's just like, really, dude? And Jimmy's sitting there talking about, we're gonna get this shot, and then we're gonna move in on her, and the dark hair guy's like, you don't see a dolly here. We're not gonna move in because there's no dolly. You didn't pay for the dolly, so we don't have the dolly. And he's the cynical one. And then the blonde-haired dude who's taller, he's just in awe of Jimmy McGill. He's like, this guy has the most amazing directorial vision ever. You could just see in his eyes, he's so excited to be working for the artist formerly known as Jimmy McGill. And we see, the Doris come down in her stair lift kind of thing, that come down the stairs, and she says, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. McGill. Just call back to, what is the name of that movie? I don't remember. The point being, it's a callback to a thing. And so they shoot the commercial, and later on, Jimmy shows Kim the commercial, and it's actually pretty good. It's a far sight better than giant blocks of texts coming on. And Jimmy knows that he can target this commercial at the people in the Sandpiper residency. He knows their schedule. He knows when they're watching Murder, She Wrote. He knows when they're going to be, sitting there with their Jell-O cups from last season, watching the television. And so he set, in his mind, he's like, and pitches it to his law firm boss, hey, we can hit them where they live. The Sandpiper people can't turn off. I mean, they could turn off the television, but they're not going to know that this is coming until it's too late. We'll get these people that maybe the Sandpiper people are stopping our mailers from coming in, but we can target them anyway in a way that the Sandpiper people can't stop. And it's the right thing to do, but once again, he can't quite bring himself to do it in exactly the right way. Because, and this is the part that I almost didn't buy into in the episode, because he goes to tell his boss about this commercial several times. He starts to work up the courage. He starts trying to figure out a way to approach his somewhat older boss as the new guy in the firm to say, hey, here's a commercial. Here, I made this. Let's run it. And he doesn't do it. And there's a part of me that understands so the things that work for it are, A, he's used to working on his own. And I think that he foresees a lot of red tape potentially, and just slogging through getting everybody's approval if he waits to tell this guy. And because he's heard about the many, many meetings that went into the production of the previous episode or the previous commercial, and he knows that these people aren't really experienced with this kind of advertising, there is definitely the aspect of it where he doesn't want to get mired down. He thinks, man, this is probably the way to go. It's faster, it's cheaper. But there's a part of me too that thinks has a little bit of a problem with this, that Jimmy doesn't tell them, because Slippin' Jimmy could figure this out. I think with all of his smooth, fast-talking skills, Jimmy McGill could absolutely sell this commercial to these people and get their approval. They already like him at this law firm. He knows, I mean, some of them do at least. So it's not like he doesn't have any leverage, but he chooses not to. And I can almost understand that, but there's a part of me that just doesn't quite buy into the fact that he hesitates and decides to go on his own. But regardless of whether I buy into it or not, he does go ahead and run the commercial on his own. And there's a great moment where well, first of all, he runs the commercial and there's the lead up to it. And he's watching the phone lines around the time that he knows the commercial is going to air. And I got to say, I've never seen a scene of someone looking at a phone be that tense for me before, because there's this buildup of, is the call going to come in? Is anybody going to respond to this? Maybe this is just going to be a complete flop, because we've seen Jimmy fail over and over and over again when he tries to do the right thing. And this is ostensibly the right thing. And he's sitting there and he's looking at the phone, and nothing happens, and nothing happens, and nothing happens. And for like a solid minute, he's just sitting there tapping his feet. And then the first light lights up, and you think, maybe that's just somebody calling the law firm. That could be. And then the second light, and then the third light, and the fourth light. And it's just, then it's a cascade of the lights on the phone filling up. And I mean, it's so exhilarating. You feel his excitement that, man, this worked. That commercial went out. It got the people that they needed. It did what it was supposed to do. Everything he predicted worked out great. And then the other shoe drops. A little bit later, he's at home with Kim watching some old movie and gets a call from the head of the law firm. And this dude is pissed at Jimmy and chews him out. And Jimmy does a really interesting thing in that, and he's been hiding this from Kim the whole time, because at the very beginning of the episode, Kim says to him, you can't be stepping too far out of bounds. You need to be good because I recommended you. And this is my reputation on the line. I went to bat for you to have a job at this law firm. If you screw this up, you've screwed it up for me and for you. So don't screw it up. And so Jimmy plays off this phone call with his boss in front of Kim, like, continues on the phone call and acts as if nothing is wrong, and effectively lies to Kim. He doesn't look her in the eye and say, everything is good with the commercial, my boss loved it. But he really does sell this to her in a way to make her think that all is well when all is really, really not well. And you can kind of see that there's a seed planted here for stuff to go major sideways, because Kim is gonna find out. I feel relatively even if this works out for Jimmy, it's possible he goes in there and he talks his way out of it, and they come out slapping him on the back and saying, yeah, good job. I don't see any scenario where Kim doesn't find out that he lied to her and tried to make her think that everything was kosher when it was not. And I think that's gonna be a breach in their relationship. The first crack, if you will, that's really gonna maybe get between them as they're starting to get closer. I mean, we're seeing them get cozy. We're seeing her at his house, his nice corporate house with the balls in the bowl, watching TV and just hanging out. And their relationship is still really young, though, and kind of unsteady, and I don't see how this is going to play out well for him. In the B plot of the episode, we have Mike, who is, again, kind of off doing his own thing, not really connected to Jimmy. I'm sure it will get connected back in shortly, but this is a show that definitely plays out its cards as long as it needs to and doesn't feel the need to have these people interact if it's not natural. And so he's off just spending time with his, with his granddaughter and daughter-in-law. From the previous season, if you don't recall, his son had been killed by corrupt cops who had found out that his son was going to rat on them. Mike was a corrupt cop at one point. He was one of those guys who, would have been on the side of the people that his son was going to rat on. So that's sort of where Mike is at, and he and his daughter-in-law and granddaughter have all moved out here to Albuquerque, and she starts telling him this story about how she's afraid of these gunshots that she keeps hearing. She, hearing pop, pop, pop in the nighttime, and Mike has a great line. I forget exactly what he said. She says, "I don't want to worry you," and he says, "I'm not the worrying type." And the delivery of that line is so amazing because you just hear him say, like, "I don't worry about stuff. I just punch it until it goes away." Which is so Mike and so perfect. But we see him, hear about this problem, and his daughter-in-law says to him, no, I don't want you to worry. I don't need you to be, nervous about this. We'll be fine. I'm just, kind of, and he says, I'm going to take care of it some way or another. And he offers to sleep on the couch to keep them safe. And she says, no, I don't want you to do that. It's okay. Just, I just wanted you to know that I was a little bit nervous. And so Mike, because he's Mike, takes things into his own hand. And the next night, he's out there sitting outside the house with his earpiece in, listening to the ball game, which I love. That's a great callback to season 1 as well, where he was at the, I forget what the family's name was, but he's outside their house, casing the joint, listening to the ball game. And he's in his house, and he sits there, and it gets on later and later into the evening. And then at a certain point, he's, it's later, we see the ball game has gone off. It's like 2:00 in the morning, and you hear pop, 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 and you think, what's going on? And he grabs his gun out of the glove box and checks to make sure there's a trigger or a bullet in the chamber, and the tension is building, and and this old creepy station wagon's rolling along down the street real slow, and you hear this pop getting closer and closer, and then the station wagon rolls by him, and you see that it's the newspaper guy just throwing out newspapers, pop, onto the driveways. Apparently nobody in Albuquerque has a mailbox newspaper delivery. As a former newspaper man, I find this detail offensive. Some people get their I'm just kidding. Some people get their newspapers delivered in the mailbox. But he puts his gun back away, and then we cut to the next day with him dragging himself into work, obviously having been up all night. Now he's got to go stand in the booth all day and be tired and deal with this stuff. And he gets the call, just as he's getting to work, he gets a call from his daughter-in-law, and we see him, I assume, call in a family emergency, leave, go to their house, and she says to him, there were shots again last night. And Mike knows that's not true because he was there the whole time. And she points to this chip out of one of the pillars in the house and says, see, that must be a ricochet. That must be some kind of a gunshot. I need to get out of this neighborhood. And that, to me, is maybe the most interesting moment in the episode, because it's so hard to get a read on exactly where this woman is coming from with her. I mean, obviously it's not true. We know for a fact Mike was there all night. He was awake. He's no slouch. He didn't fall asleep or miss it somehow. There was no gunshot. Mike knows there's no gunshot. But he sees this chip in the pillar that I'm going to assume that she manufactured, and knows that she's telling him something that is definitely not the truth and may be a deliberate lie. The options are she's deliberately lying, or she's imagining things and sort of fabricating a story to fit her imagination. But either way, he doesn't call her on it. And that, I think, is maybe the most interesting turning point in the episode, because we really see how much these people mean to Mike, because he's alone without them. He needs this woman and her granddaughter to be a part of his life, to help keep him human, because otherwise there's nothing for him. He's just an old man in a strange town with a job where he sits in a glass box all day and, you know, has strangers drive by. Other than these people, he has nothing left. So he is willing to just look at a lie that he knows is a lie and not say anything about it, because he needs to have that connection to them. And he doesn't question her. He says, I believe you, even though obviously he can't believe her because it's not the truth and he knows it. But one way or another, he says, all right, I'll get you out of here. And it's not easy for him. He's not making the money at the courthouse that he would have needed to make to afford to get them another house. And now that his relationship with Price has ended, he's not making that money. So we see him go to the vet in order to try to scrounge up any kind of cash to help his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter. And the vet's like, listen, man, I got like a bodyguard job. It's $200. It's not, and $200 even to me is like, really? That's not that much, especially for someone with Mike's skill. But Mike isn't willing to do what the vet calls the next level work, which I gotta mention. I love that there's this setting of this veterinary clinic that Mike takes his dog as a pretense to sort of talk with this guy who has connection with the underworld. It's just it's one of those things that may not have any bearing in reality, but it feels like a great little detail with a kernel of potential truth in it. That's just classically the kind of thing you would see in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, similar to the tented houses being meth labs and things like that, where the underworld is closer than you think it is. It's just a bunch of regular dudes working regular jobs who happen to also be criminals. And we do see this sort of dilemma for Mike, because he's got moral gray areas. He's definitely not an honest man, but he also has his own personal principles that he's not willing to forego. And the guy says to him, listen, if you're not going to be out there killing people and busting kneecaps, of people who maybe aren't necessarily guilty of anything, I can't afford to give you anything other than this cheapo bodyguard job. Brain stopped finding words for a second. And so Mike, after some sort of internal struggling, says, okay, I'll take it, because he's got to have something. He needs to have the extra cash, even if it's only a little bit, to help out with getting this new house. And we really see that he's between a rock and a hard place, because he can't. He's here accepting this obvious untruth from his daughter-in-law about there being gunshots, getting her a whole new house in a better neighborhood, and having to really, really struggle to find the cash to just support this thing that he knows is an untruth. And that, to me, is where I think the emotional core of this episode comes from, because he's like Jimmy, he's trying to do the right thing, but he's obviously willing to do it in the wrong way. And also, like Jimmy, although in it sort of coming at it from the other direction, we have lies happening in this episode as well. Well, again, maybe not a lie, but definitely some kind of untruth, delusion, something that the daughter-in-law is spinning for him, where he knows that she's lying and he has to deal with that. And so in Jimmy's side of the episode, it's him lying to Kim in Mike's side of the episode, it's his daughter-in-law lying to him, and he takes the job for the 200, and we see him, kind of with the his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter living with him on the couch, at least for the time being, while he's looking for a new place. And then the phone call comes in, and the phone call from the vet says, "Hey, I got a call. I got a job. I know, better than that bodyguard job. It's a lot of money, and it's just for you." Like, the person who called requested you, and you're thinking, who could it be? And I'm sure Mike is thinking, who could it be too? And he gets to, you see him drive out to this old sort of rundown location. He parks his car. There's just some great shots of the bright headlights of the car shining into this warehouse area as he walks in front of the car towards whoever he's going to meet, which A, looks really cool and cinematic, and B, is probably a tactic that he learned from being a policeman to keep your quote-unquote opponent blinded by the light so that they, you have the night vision advantage. And I love that you can justify that in Mike's mind. It's not just that he left the lights on for no reason. He's actually logistically thinking, I can blind this person if I need to, and I'll have a little bit of an edge. And of course, out of the shadows comes Nacho, which is an interesting turn of events and a little bit worrying to me. As I was watching this, I was like, oh no, Mike's going to get wasted. Then, of course, the smart part of my brain said, no, you idiot. He's alive in Breaking Bad. Like, he's not going to die here, probably. Although, sometimes I wonder if I wouldn't put it past them to just be like, nope, this is an alternate timeline now. Somebody's dead, which would be great. But they would just, like, give a giant middle finger to everybody who is expecting this to be, 100% predictable. Not that this is at all predictable, but there's always those complaints from people like, I know how it's going to end. They're not going to kill off the heroes because they're the heroes. It totally misses the point of storytelling at all. If a story well told, even if you know the ending, is still a good story. But there is that moment where you're like, Nacho's pissed. He's here to off Mike or something. Something bad's going to happen. And Nacho says to him, I got somebody for you that I need them to go away. And then that's it. We cut to credits. The silent, like, bump, bump, bump. Obviously it's not in our minds. It's bump, bump, bump. But then it just quiet credits created by Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould. And you're like, who are we going to kill? Because to prognosticate about the future of the series, the person who it obviously makes the most sense for Mike to be going after for Nacho to be hiring him to kill is Tuco. And we know that, again, to go back to the, knowing how things go in Breaking Bad, we know Tuco's alive by Breaking Bad. So that's not going to go well if it's Tuco. It's not going to kill Mike either, but man, I don't know. My wheels are spinning trying to figure out which way that's going to go. As far as Slippin' Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, whatever we're calling him, he's a little bit easier to predict. It's really easy to see that he is going to shoot himself in the foot a bunch of times and then end up getting kicked out of Davison, Maine. And he's going to take Kim with him, and she's going to resent him because it's his fault. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen all right away, but he is building a house of cards without any glue to hold any of that together, and the slightest breath of air is just going to blow down this tightrope, mixing metaphors. He's tap dancing on this tightrope of I can still be Slippin' Jimmy and be a legitimate lawyer and have Kim and maybe not exactly have the respect of Chuck, but he still kind of cares about what Chuck thinks. It's not going to work. He's going to fall off the rope, and it's going to be on the Slippin' Jimmy, the Saul Goodman side. But when and how that's going to happen, and I say fall like it's a single instance. I mean, we already see him definitely angling more that way, where he's not at all tied down to what is right, what he knows to be right and what everybody else says is right. He's just going to do what has to be done, but still in the shell of the right thing. Still in the guise of the proper use of the law and helping other people out. But make no mistake, he's got good intentions, and they are paving the road to hell for him. So yeah, will any of that happen? How will it happen? I don't know. You'll have to tune in next week to find out. I'll be back then with another episode of the Better Call Saul recap. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.